The most loyal customer the Reliant company ever had was Princess Anne. Think about what that name usually means. 3 wheels, plastic, the little van that tipped over on the corner in every sitcom Britain ever made, a punchline on wheels. And yet the Queen's own daughter, a woman who could have driven anything this country built, kept going back to it, not once. One scimitar after another for 30 years, fast enough to get her pulled over by the police, good enough that she never wanted anything else. So the question writes itself. What did she know about this car that the rest of the country, still laughing at the badge, never bothered to find out? To understand the answer, you have to start with the joke. Because the joke was real, and Reliant earned it. Reliant built 3-wheelers. That was the business. Little fiberglass vans and bubble-shaped runabouts with a single wheel at the front, sold to people who, thanks to a quirk in British law, could drive one on a motorcycle license and pay less tax for the privilege. They were cheap, they were slow, and they had a famous, unfortunate habit of leaning very hard in corners if you got enthusiastic. For most of the country, that was Reliant, a company that made a virtue out of leaving a wheel off. Now hold that picture in your head, the wobbling van, the cheap plastic, the national smirk, because at the very same factory in Tamworth, the same company was about to build something that would end up parked outside Buckingham Palace. How does a firm like that make the leap? It didn't, on its own. The leap started with a car nobody at Reliant designed, and a rejection from someone far more famous. In 1962, a designer named David Ogle built a sleek little coupe called the SX250. It sat on the underpinnings of the Daimler SP250, and it was genuinely lovely, low, clean, the kind of shape that made people stop on the pavement. Ogle did what any designer would do. He took it to Daimler and offered it to them. Daimler said no. No is the hinge the whole story turns on. Because the managing director of Reliant, a sharp operator named Ray Wiggin, saw the Ogle car at a motor show and understood instantly what Daimler had missed. A small company can't afford to invent beauty from scratch, but a small company can recognize it when it's standing right in front of them, unwanted. Reliant bought the design. They reworked it, dropped in a Ford engine because Reliant was far too small to build its own, and called it the Scimitar, a proper coupe, from the 3-wheeler company. It sold in modest numbers. It was a curiosity, and it might have stayed a curiosity forever, if not for one experimental car that was never even meant for sale. In 1965, Ogle built a one-off show car for the glass company Triplex, a strange, glassy estate designed to show off their products. It was styled by a designer named Tom Caron, and it planted an idea in Reliant's head that nobody else in the industry had taken seriously. What if you took a proper sports car, the speed, the looks, the engine, and gave it a tailgate, a boot you could actually use, room in the back for a dog, a case, a saddle, a car that could embarrass a sports car at the lights on Friday and carry the family shopping on Saturday? Today that sounds obvious. Half the cars on the road are some version of that idea. In 1968, almost nobody was building it. There was no name for the category because the category barely existed. Reliant asked Tom Caron to turn the idea into something they could actually sell, and here Caron did the thing that separates a stylist from an artist. He gave the car a rising waistline, line down the side that climbs as it sweeps toward the back, so the whole shape looks like it's leaning forward even when it's standing still. It made a practical estate car look fast, look hungry. They called it the GTE, Grand Touring Estate, and they built it in an almost impossibly short time, racing it onto the stand at the 1968 London Motor Show. But a beautiful shape over a weak car is just a pretty disappointment. The question every serious buyer would ask was the same one you're probably asking now. Fine, it looks the part. But does it actually go? That answer was hiding under the bonnet, and it had a surprising name attached to it. The engine was a Ford 3-litre V6 in the Essex, making in the region of 135 to 138 brake horsepower. Not exotic. Reliant deliberately used Ford parts because Ford parts were everywhere, which meant a Scimitar was that rare thing. A fast specialist car, a normal garage could actually fix. But the engine is not the surprise. The surprise is the man Reliant hired to build the bones of the car. His name was John Crostwaite, and before he came to the 3-wheeler company in Tamworth, he had worked at BRM, at Cooper, and at Lotus. Read that again. Those are not ordinary names. Those are the names of British Grand Prix racing in its greatest era, the teams that were, in those exact years, beating Ferrari on the world stage. Reliant, the firm the nation laughed at, had quietly hired a man whose previous job was building Formula One cars. Crosthwaite didn't just stretch the old chassis. He designed a new steel box section frame, gave it proper independent front suspension borrowed from Triumph, and moved the spare wheel up into the nose to free space in the back. The result was a car that handled like it meant it, and because the body was fiberglass, not steel, it was light, and it would never rust the way every other British sports car of the era quietly rotted from the wheel arches up. So here is what you actually had: a genuinely quick car. Contemporary testers clocked it from rest to 60 in around 10.5 seconds, with a top speed comfortably past 115 miles an hour, figures that put it right among the respected sports cars of the day, while carrying 4 people and their luggage. Chassis designed by an ex-Formula One engineer, a body that outlasted its rivals, and a shape that turned heads on a company that built tipping vans. It cost £1,759 at launch. To put that number in its place, an MGC GT of the same era sat well below it, and a Rover 3500 sat just above. The Scimitar was asking to be measured against serious cars, and it had every right to. The buyers came. Reliant cut back the old coupe and built GTEs 4-1 against it. Volume jumped 20% in the first year. And then, in November 1970, the most famous customer of all walked in. Except she didn't walk in. The car was a gift. For her 20th birthday, combined with Christmas, the Queen and Prince Philip gave Princess Anne a Scimitar GTE, Air Force blue, grey leather inside. The number plate read 1420H, chosen deliberately. Anne was Colonel-in-Chief of the 14th/20th Hussars, and the plate was a nod to the regiment. Stop and weigh that for a second. The royal family, with access to every Aston, every Jaguar, every Rolls-Royce in the kingdom, chose a car from the company best known for a 3-wheeled joke. Not as a publicity stunt. As a present to a daughter they knew loved to drive, and she did love to drive. The Scimitar gave Anne 2 things almost nothing else could at once. It was genuinely fast, a fact she demonstrated by getting caught speeding in it. The kind of detail that quietly tells you everything about how the car was actually used. And it had a proper tailgate and folding seats, which meant it swallowed all the gear that came with a serious equestrian's life. Horse kit in the back, 100-mile-an-hour cruise on the way home. A sports car you didn't have to apologize to for owning a life. She would go on to own 8 more. That is the part that should land hardest. Anybody can be given a car once. Loyalty is the second purchase, and the third, and the 9th. Across 3 decades, through every change of fashion, with the whole world's motor industry to choose from, Princess Anne kept coming back to the badge the country mocked. She wasn't fooled by the joke. She had simply driven past it. Here is where the story turns from one princess to the whole industry, because the rest of the world's car makers were watching what Reliant had done, and they were about to copy it. When the GTE arrived, it had no direct rival. It had invented a space, and one by one, far bigger and far prouder companies arrived in that same space, clearly having taken notes. Volvo built the P1800ES, a sleek estate version of their sports coupe, in 1972. Lancia followed with the Beta HPE in 1975. The shape Reliant pioneered, the sporting estate, the fast car with a useful back end, became a recognized type of car that serious manufacturers built on purpose. Sit with the strangeness of that. The company synonymous with the cheapest, most mocked vehicle on British roads had quietly sketched a template that Volvo and Lancia chose to follow. The joke had been ahead of all of them. But being first is not the same as being safe, and the same instinct that made the Scimitar special, small company, borrowed parts, clever shortcuts, carried a danger inside it that the next decade would expose. Through the 1970s, Reliant tried to push the car upmarket. The SE6 of 1975 grew bigger, wider, plusher, chasing the executive buyer with bolder styling and more cabin space. It was a reasonable plan, but the Scimitar's whole magic had been that lean, hungry shape, and a bigger, heavier car asked more of the same engine without always giving back the same thrill. Then the ground shifted underneath the entire idea. By 1980, Ford simply stopped making the torquey 3-litre Essex engine the Scimitar had been built around. A small company does not have the luxury of building its own replacement. Reliant had to switch to a different Ford V6, the 2.8-litre Cologne, and re-engineer the car to suit it. They were, as they had always been, at the mercy of a supplier far larger than themselves, the very dependence that had made the car affordable in the first place now deciding its fate. A convertible came late, in the early 1980s, and found few buyers. The world had moved on to hot hatchbacks, small, cheap, fast cars that did the clever, practical, quick trick the Scimitar had pioneered, but for a fraction of the price. The thing Reliant invented had been democratized by everyone else and sold back to the public cheaper than Reliant could ever manage. In 1986, Reliant pulled the plug. After 18 years, the Scimitar GTE was finished, and yet, this is the detail that tells you what the car really meant. That still wasn't quite the end. A company called Middlebridge bought the rights and kept building modernized Scimitars into 1990. When they folded, another firm took the tooling and went on building cars to order, one at a time, for buyers who refused to let the shape die. People do not do that for a joke. They do that for something they love. Princess Anne, for the record, took delivery of one of those final Middlebridge Scimitars. 3 decades after the first blue one with the regimental plate, she was still choosing the same car. So, was it a lie? In a way, yes. And that's the title's whole point. The badge lied. It told the country cheap, slow, plastic, 3 wheels, have a laugh. And millions of people believed the badge and never looked past it. They drove their sensible saloons right past a car that was quicker, cleverer, longer lasting, and years ahead of the industry, and they saw only the punchline. But the lie was never in the car. The car told the truth the whole time. It was fast. It was beautiful. It was built by a Formula One engineer and bodied in a material that wouldn't rot, and it handed you a sports car and an estate in the same shape before the rest of the world worked out that was even possible. Princess Anne saw through the badge because she did the one thing the country wouldn't. She drove it. And once you've driven the truth, the joke stops being funny. That's the real lesson sitting underneath all of this, and it reaches a long way past one strange British car. We laugh at badges. We trust the label and skip the test drive. We let the name of a thing tell us what it's worth, and we are wrong more often than we'd ever admit. The most loyal customer Reliant ever had wasn't loyal to a logo. She was loyal to a car that happened to be wearing the wrong one, and she was right about it for 30 years while everyone else was still laughing. The badge said it couldn't be serious. The car spent 18 years proving the badge wrong, and the only people who ever found that out were the ones who stopped laughing long enough to get in and turn the key.